Is there a Reformed bookstore in Seoul that sells Reformed books in English? Well, travel with me to Seoul to find out. Before we travel around Seoul, I would like to dedicate this episode to my lovely wife. Thank you for putting up with me all these years and for sharing my love of Reformed theology books. In fact, my wife was converted long ago through Bunyan's work, Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners. Well, that is an episode for another time. So let's go back to the question at hand. Is there a Reformed bookstore in Seoul, South Korea, that sells Reformed books in English? Yet, before we start exploring around Seoul, let's ask why this question is important in the first place. Why does one need to go to a Christian bookstore when one could just shop online? If you are a foreigner, all you need is a customs clearance code, and you could order from Amazon, Reformation Heritage Books, or even Yes24. Buying books online has many advantages, and many of the Reformed titles are available. Yet there are many people out there, myself included, who enjoy exploring the aisles in search of a great find. When you shop online, you usually already know what book you're looking for. But when you visit a good bookstore, you might be surprised to discover a theological work you never expected, one that could change your life. There is just something special about browsing the selections in a bookstore, actually holding a book in your hands, feeling its weight, and flipping through its pages. You could check if it's Smythe sewn or a paperback, examine how it's bound, feel the texture of the paper, and scan the table of contents, scripture index, and subject index if they're included. Reading the book blurbs and even taking in the scent of the book all add to the experience. Also, those who are not Reformed may come across a Reformed work while browsing the Christianity section of a bookstore and be introduced to Reformed theology in this way. Well, let's start our travel south of the Han River to Gyeode. We come to this place in memory of a wonderful Reformed bookstore called La Bibla that closed down just recently and sadly sometime in April 2023. This was the best bookstore for finding a wide selection of Reformed titles. When I arrived in South Korea many years ago, I asked my professor, who was conducting research and teaching at a local seminary in Seoul, if there was a good bookstore that sold Reformed books in Seoul, and he pointed me to La Bibla. La Bibla moved 3 times. It was first located in Gangnam, not far from the Gyeobul Tower. Then it located to Namdaemun, and finally near Gyeode Station, not too far from the express bus terminal, and which was across the street from the Acro Vista apartments. Initially, it was on the first floor in Gyeode, right next to Joe's Sandwich Shop, before moving to the 3rd or 4th floor of the same building. What you are seeing on the screen now is its former location, which has since become a Fast 5 co-working space. When they were at the Nambu bus terminal location, their book selection was quite impressive. There were around 6 to 8 aisles of theology books, including biblical commentaries, biblical language reference works, and books on historical and systematic theology. They had works on the ancient creeds and the Reformed confessions. The titles that they had were leaning heavily, confessionally Reformed. This was my favorite bookstore of all time. When they moved to Gyeode, their aisle space was reduced to 3 aisles, but at all 3 locations, at the Nambu and the first location in Gangnam and the last location in Gyeode, they heavily focused on primary source material from the Reformers and Reformed scholastics. They always had fresh works from Reformation Heritage Books coming in. In fact, I purchased Volume 1 of William Perkins sometime in 2015 from there, as well as The Marrow of Modern Divinity back in 2011. The bookstore was also famous for legally printing the BDAG and selling it at a fair price. It cost 50,000 won, which is about $34 today. In April 2023, La Biblia closed down. It felt like a good friend had died. Well, this bookstore went down, yet the question is, are there any more bookstores like it? Well, before we move on, I'm going to stop by McDonald's to Gyoda to eat. There's nothing like a double quarter-pounder fries and a Coke in February in Seoul. Well, that was a good lunch. We're in Gyoda right now, so we'll stick around here and stop by and travel to Gangnam to visit the Gyobo bookstore there. Now, we are here, and as of February 2025, the Gyobo bookstore in Gangnam has Knowing God by Packer and some books by Keller, but there isn't much for English readers of Reformed theology to feast on. There are Reformed books available in Korean at this bookstore. 2 years ago, my friend saw a brockle in Korean, but again, it's tough to find Reformed books in English here. Well, not too far from Gangnam is Socho, which is 2 stops away by subway. We will go to Sarang Church located here in Socho, and we find that the bookstore is closed. Well, in 2023, a couple years ago, I saw a couple of popular Reformed titles in English, yet not many. However, in the same year, 2023, there was a really good children's book translated into Korean titled Sophie and the Heidelberg Cat, a book on the Heidelberg Catechism, which is a very good book. Well, we haven't found much in the year 2025, so let's head north of the Han River to the Itaewon area, Noksapyeong to be exact, which is a very beautiful area. We arrive at a historical used bookstore in the Noksapyeong area where books of all kinds flow in and out on a regular basis. From time to time, Reformed titles make their appearance here, whether or not they have Reformed books. This bookstore is definitely a must visit. The atmosphere is cozy, and if you want to indulge in the smell of books, this is the place. Last year, I found a Martin Lloyd-Jones work on Ephesians 5 and a 1998 edition of Blame It on the Brain at this very bookstore. Yet, as of February 2025, I don't see any Reformed works here today, but they do have a decent history section. Well, let's head further north to the Jongno area, specifically Gwangamun, and stop by the Gyobo bookstore there. Right now, there aren't many Reformed books on display. We could see the Everyday Gospel Bible by Paul Tripp, and if you look carefully, there's a work by Westminster Seminary grad Greg Welty. We also spot some books by Keller and Barrett's Simply Trinity, which is very impressive. Gyobo here used to carry a handful of Reformed works between 2010 and 2013. I remember finding titles by Michael Horton and others. They even had Horton's Covenant and Eschatology, which was surprising. And in 2023, a couple of years ago, I found Muller's Dictionary of Latin and Greek Theological Terms. But now it's gone. Someone bought it. Then in 2024, last year, they had an Oxford Handbook on the Reformation, which I'm sure was also purchased, along with some Greek language sources that are no longer available here in 2025. We will head to one more place, which is close to the Gyobo bookstore in Gwangamun. This is the Word of Life bookstore, a good 5 to 6 minute walk from Gwangamun Square. They recently reduced their English theology book section, but a large part is still there. There were some commentaries from the church fathers available, but they got rid of those. This bookstore has more than a handful of Reformed titles. You could see Scott Clark's Recovering the Reformed Confession. They have a few Banner of Truth books and titles from Crossway. They also have the 16-volume works of John Owen, sold as a set, minus the Hebrews commentary, a set of John Flavel's works, and Calvin's sermons on Job. They have Greek and Hebrew Bibles, some Greek helps, a couple of interlinears, a copy of the Septuagint, the 1560 Geneva Bible published by Hendrickson, and some reference works. a couple of years ago, they sold the Reformation Study Bible. As of early 2025 today, in February, they have a James Boyce book, Louis Berkhoff Systematic Theology, and some Owen Puritan paperbacks, which are on the bottom shelf and not visible on the screen. They have new Reformed titles flowing in, you could tell, such as the new Crossway editions of Owen, volumes 7 and 8. I think we could say, although the Word of Life bookstore is not a La Biblia, this bookstore for La Biblia is very special. I believe it's safe to now answer the question posed at the beginning of this video. Is there a Reformed bookstore in Seoul that sells Reformed books in English? And I would say yes. The Word of Life bookstore provides a good handful of Reformed titles. I hope this bookstore keeps going strong and continues to offer solid Reformed content. If you know of any other bookstores that I missed that sell Reformed books in English, please put them in the comment section below. Well, thank you for traveling with me around the Seoul area. I'll be heading back to feed my cat now. Have a good one. And I hope you find a great Reformed book to dig into. This was Theology Mukbang, saving confessional breadcrumbs from a potential famine.